Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. It's 12:30, it's Wednesday afternoon. I'm Paul John Dykes and I'm joined by Patrick McGilp, John Hughes and also Brian Dignan, who'd just been getting it tight before we even came on live, Brian. Before we even put you out to the masses, you've been getting it tight. I've just got to say, straight off the bat, we were talking yesterday, we won't go over it again, about Celtic merch and the Ireland Origins jersey. That is a belter of a tracksuit you're wearing there, Brian. I've got to commend you on your fashionable choices today. Well done. Love it.
A first time for everything, Paul John. I tell you that. I don't hear that too often. So, who needs the comments section when you're on the podcast with Big John? That's all I can say.
The comments section, that takes us nicely on to the first point of discussion last night. I had a wee job to do. I'm running through some of the comments on the YouTube. And there's this belief among some people who tune into a Celtic State of Mind that I've got a group of favourites that I bring up every single day on the comments. So I had to explain that the way this actually works is these comments come up live. It's like, the old, remember the video printer? And it used to go up the screen with the scores coming in and the goals and the red cards and all that stuff. It's a bit like that. So blink and you miss it. Before you know it, there's another 15 comments coming in, etc., etc. I can assure you, I am not that skilled to be keeping a four-way conversation ongoing and specifically choosing or not choosing people based on their avatar. So just wanted to get that out. And just to prove it, Patrick, give me a number 1 to 15.
12.
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Here you go. Lo and behold, it's you and Boy Martin. That was random. That was a random choice. I don't even know what he's saying until I bring it up. That's how it works. Everybody is entitled to their view. Maybe the people complaining just weren't making very good views. Just putting it out there. You and Boy Martin, our biggest concern is our defence. Let's start with the defence. And if Carter Vickers is out, I think we need to play 3 at the back with wing backs because we are so easy to score against. We'll start off with the defence then. You and Boy reckons a change of shape. We've not really seen Brendan doing it that often. Patrick McGilp, what's your thoughts at the moment? I thought it was the biggest talking point of the weekend was the poor defensive display, particularly the centre-half partnership, which is not strong enough in my view.
No, it's not strong enough. I know we've been quite unlucky with injuries this season, but we seem determined to play our worst possible centre-halves available to us. I'm pretty sure Narovski's out. Carter Vickers obviously felt something in training on the Saturday. Lagerbielke, must be... God knows what he's doing in training. He's maybe nutmegged Anton Rodgers one too many times, and Brendan's not too happy with it.
Is he still allowed into the training sessions, Anton? Is he?
But he must be wondering what he has to do to get himself a game because we kept a hold of him. He was 1 foot out the door, about to step on a plane, and we kept a hold of him, and now we're not playing him. I mean, that defence is crying out for someone a bit more solid because the 2 guys that we played at the weekend just aren't good enough to play together. They need, I don't know, call it sort of a senior partner or some sort of older brother next to them, some sort of Carter Vickers like, as I say, older brother, someone who can keep the defence solid. It just doesn't work when it's the 2 of them together. I don't know about a 3 at the back with wing backs. I don't think we've got the full backs to play with wing backs. I certainly don't think Taylor is a wing back. I don't think Alistair Johnson is either. He's quite physical. He's got the athleticism. They can both put in a decent cross, but I don't think they're wing backs. I'm not a fan of 3 at the back. I know, had great success under Martin O'Neill. I know Neil Lennon tried it for a period and it worked quite well, but I prefer the 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1 or whatever you want to call it that Rodgers and Ange like to play. But something does need to change. Scales done well, came in great first half of the season, but since the turn of the year, he's slowing the play down, and defensively it's getting shown up a bit as well now. So I think we do need a shake up of the centre halves. I would throw Lagerbielke in there if Narovski and Carter Vickers are still out because something needs to change. I don't think it's the formation, but I think the personnel, there's an option there.
Yep, and Robert Highland's pointing out that it's all to do with subconscious bias on my part. Robert, you know that's obviously one of my buzz terms. So thank you very much for saying that it's all about unconscious bias. That doesn't exist on Acsom, does it? If it doesn't exist in Scottish refereeing, John, how can it possibly exist here? Now, the defence, loads of comments coming through, which we'll get up on the screen as soon as we possibly can. Rory Boy says the defence is not his biggest concern. It's our lack of physical midfield and a goal scorer who can knock in 30 goals per year that's doing the harm. We've got one of them, John. We'll come back to him later. He's on the tagline. What's your thoughts about the defence? And some of the points Patrick was saying there was a compilation of occasions where Liam Scales passed the ball behind or directly to Stephen Welsh rather in front of him. And when you see it half a dozen times, you're thinking, well, that is slowing the play down. Stephen Welsh then can't receive the ball on his left foot. He then slows it down. Everything is at a very slow kind of pace at the moment, John, isn't it?
Well, I mean, it's sort of indicative of our whole season because you have guys who have been in form for patches and you think that's that problem solved. And then they're out of form again. Now, to me, it's actually a bit more concerning. I thought the centre-halves were poor, but the defensive unit is poor. Now, Alistair Johnson is brilliant at going forward, but he wasn't playing well defensively earlier on in the season, and in my view, is still not. Even that first goal, the gap between him and Stephen Welsh was just outrageous. And if you ask me, it was more Alistair Johnson's man than Stephen Welsh's. So, and on the other side, we've got Greg Taylor, did he suddenly start playing well defensively from earlier on in the season? Because I didn't notice that. I noticed that both of them are going forward very well. And I think one of the big problems we had at the weekend was they didn't feel as if there was enough threat, or they felt as if they could get so much joy down Livingston's flanks that that's what they were focused on. And they were right to an extent because the Livy fullbacks were dreadful. So, I mean, Kuhn had his man on toast pretty much early on. And Maeda was running the boy ragged on the other side. So, they were right to that extent. And ultimately, I suppose that the old mentality of just we'll score more than them. But defensively, they left Scales and Welsh really quite exposed on a number of occasions, in my view. And neither of them are playing well enough, particularly to cope with that. And the things you're saying there, I was watching back some of it, and both Scales and Welsh put very good balls through at certain points, but some of the basic stuff you're talking about, the build-up stuff, yeah, I saw that, and it's really poor. And if you think a lot of the time when Scales has come in earlier on in the season, when he actually did play well, he was actually playing on the left-hand side of the defence. So when Scales wasn't in. So, look, the problem we have is just form. I don't think anyone's playing particularly well. I don't think anyone's at the top of their game. I think a lot of people are lacking in confidence. I think Scales is now rattled because he's been asked to be the main man, and that puts you under a fair amount of pressure. And so, you can see whenever anything goes wrong, there's a sense of panic that just exudes right across the back line. And the one thing that Carter Vickers brings is that calm. Now, Carter Vickers himself hasn't been playing well because he's hardly not been injured all year. So every time he's played, he's recovering from an injury.
Yep.
There's hardly been a point where he's not been recovering from injury. But what he does do is bring that sense of calm. So, the problem I have with, throwing in Nerowski or Lagerbielke, maybe not Nerowski as much, but certainly Lagerbielke, I mean, the manager's made it very clear he doesn't think the boy, he thinks he's extremely slow. And, Stephen Welsh, for all the fact he looked slow the other day, isn't that slow for a centre half. But he didn't have a good game, Stephen, and I'm a big fan of his. But he didn't have a good game. Welsh, and Scales did not have a good game. The fact is that Livy made it look like they could score any time they held possession for any period of time. Now, there's also an issue there with the midfield, which we'll come back to. But I mean, two essentially incredibly defensive midfielders, and we couldn't be any more porous. If I described it on Twitter as we're playing less well-known formation of sieve with wingers. So,
The
you
sieve.
know, the sieve, yeah, not the diamond, we're playing the sieve, you know. So, look, I wish I had an answer, you know, but we've been through so many of these guys that I think that the manager's quite convinced that Scales and Welsh are better than the alternatives, or he wouldn't be playing them. And, you know, the problem is, yeah, I mean, everyone's saying they're not good enough. No, they're not, but that doesn't mean the guys in the wings are. You know, so we are where we are with this at the moment because the squad is so poor. You know, so it doesn't, you know, when your first team is that poor, it doesn't necessarily mean your bench is fantastic. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't want Brendan Rodgers just saving up guys on the bench that could, you know, be game changers. You know, just to give us all a nice wee surprise halfway through a game. You know, it's just very, very frustrating because you watch the highlights of that game back and it looks like a completely different game. It looks like we are commanding and, you know, we were creating loads of chances and all the rest of it. While I was watching the game, all I could think was, good grief, we are so porous. Mm-hmm. We just look as if we're going to give it up. And I'm afraid I don't have an answer. I do apologise.
John, you gave one anyway, and that's what's important. The big thing is there's various answers coming in through the comments, which I think shares exactly what you've just said there, John. The fact that we're now not clutching it as such, but I'm even seeing people suggesting that Iwata go back to centre half. Brandon Warren, I've not seen you that often in the comments, so I just thought I would allow you to say hail to the chat. David Boyle wants to see Lagerbielke given a chance. If it's down to pace, he must be hella slow because I don't think Scales or Welsh are blessed with speed either. Paul Martin, 1967. We need to play the ball quicker and the rest will sort itself out. Well, that is one of the biggest issues I've got with the two guys at the back. They're really slowing things down. And Ross Conley, afternoon all, how bad is Brendan Rodgers' man management been this season? For instance, what has happened to O? The same thing, really, that he's been banished. He's been banished from the squad, comes back in, sits on the bench, doesn't get a game. And I love the fact that you've got a good squad and you can rotate it, Brian. But guys like Lagerbielke and O, you know, there comes a point during a season like this where you might have to call on them and it might be a big game and we've not really shown much confidence in them. Not only that, physically, are they ready? Are they sharp enough to step into that berth? Is Lagerbielke sharp enough to step back into that berth if indeed Stephen Welsh picks up an injury or illness, which has been suggested in the comments? What's your take on it, Brian?
So there are a few things there. I think in terms of Lagerbielke having to step in if Welsh is injured, we don't really have a choice in the matter. He's going to have to step in. So if he's ready, great. If he's not ready, we'll find out soon enough. The reality is, I think that, so like, I've been very critical of Rodgers the whole season, and I'll probably continue to be. But it's also a two-way street. So, Lagerbielke, these guys that are only playing, they have to be shown in training they can't be dropped. I don't get the impression, if Rodgers is under pressure, which he is, that these guys are smashing it in training every week and doing really well, and he's just keeping them out of team because he fancies keeping them out. I think clearly there's a lack of quality, and he's thinking now, right, I've got a core group here. These are the guys I trust to do it. Let's keep them in. So I suspect that's what he's doing. And in terms of the sort of back three and the question about the defence, I said last week that I thought we should change to a back 3-3-5-2 before the game, and I thought the Livingston game was a chance to do it. You know, at home against the worst team in the league, cup game, and he didn't. So he's not going to change it now. And actually, I think the time for tinkering is probably over. I think, you know, the back four will basically stay the same. And I think that the formation will stay the same. I've been a big defender of Welsh as well. Mm-hmm. And like John, I'm a fan of his, but he did have a shocker the other day, so did Scales. However, I think that the fullbacks are getting away with murder because their position is terrible at times. And if you're a centre-back and you're two fullbacks and they're bombing forward and they're not tracking back quickly enough, or Taylor's coming in field and losing the ball and me just defending across the front, you can't do everything. Like, the criticism's unfair a wee bit, I think, because even Matt O'Reilly is a guy I love. I've often said I wear Matt O'Reilly pyjamas to bed, and I think the guy's great, but he gave the ball away he was dithering and he was loose and he gave the ball away. So that's the midfield. I think Bernardo, his qualities are off the ball, not on it, and I don't think he defends well enough, in which case, what he's in the team for? So I think there's a lot of issues around the team. I don't think it's just the two centre-backs. I think the midfield needs to be, maybe he could tweak that and have O'Reilly and Iwata providing a bit more protection. I think he should stop telling Taylor to invert because he's better in that role, but we're not good enough behind him to recover. So I think there's work to be done. I think they just need to tighten up, be a bit more confident and a bit more compact and a bit more switched on defensively as a unit. Because I think blaming it just on Welsh or Scales, I think that's unfair. And to John's point, even Carter Vickers, who is comfortably our best defender, one of the best defenders we've had for a long time, even playing in that team, he's caught out a couple of times. Because there's too much space around about and people not doing their jobs. You can see quite a few times in replays, Taylor sort of jogging back to track his man, Iwata not knowing who to track, Johnson being kind of AWOL. So there's more at stake. So I know that's not the most positive start to my return to a Wednesday, but I think that it's a wee bit unfair in the centre backs. I think there's more at stake. But I don't see Brendan changing the formation. I think we can only hope that the players in it sharpen up a wee bit, because ultimately they're the only ones that can affect it once the game starts.
At least we're sticking to Celtic, Brian. We could have been talking about the whereabouts, say, Kate Middleton, or the spat between Louis Walsh and Jedward. Let us know your thoughts in the comments section. Interesting, eh? The world's
We've had a few. We've had flat earthers in the comments and people who don't believe in dinosaurs as well. So it could really go any way today. It's quite exciting, actually.
It can go anyway, especially now that I'm mixing it up on the comment section.
Well, I have to say that was my favourite comment of all time. Very lengthy one as well, but the fact that dinosaurs were a Masonic conspiracy.
Phenomenal. I just want to prove to everybody that I do read the comments. The Civ, Smell the Glove, John Hughes has given us Not the View, 1980s vibes by calling Celtic's defence the Civ. Who's a snitch? Slow. Why sign the guy then? Absolutely.
He's welcome to the conversation, mate.
Absolutely.
God, how long have we been having this conversation for?
This is the thing that we'll get into, because we are going to be talking about what next for the structure of Celtic, and that takes in the football department, the recruitment structure, and why are you signing players that don't fit the way you play. And Johnny, boy, slow. Lagerbielke kept a clean sheet at Ibrox. The reason I'm bringing this up, yes, he did. How has Welsh shown up there in the past? He's kept a clean sheet at Ibrox, Johnny, and he's actually kept a clean sheet in every game that he started in a Celtic jersey. That's Lagerbielke's record. No too shabby. Is he that slow? I've never watched a game when Lagerbielke's been playing, Patrick, and thought he looks like he's towing a caravan. I did think that about Welsh. It was like he was towing a grand piano, trying to get back after Matt O'Reilly lost the ball. I've never thought about Lagerbielke, but obviously they've got all the data. They know how they're training, etc. And the word is that he is indeed slow. If you look at the defence against Rangers this season, it has read Ralston, not Snow, it's Johnston, Taylor, and Scales, Lagerbielke. That was your Ibrox defence. The only change for Parkhead was that Lagerbielke dropped out and Welsh came in. Welsh got injured after, I think, 60 minutes or something like that. Nawrocki comes in. So the defence has more or less been the same. I've never started with Carter Vickers this season against Rangers, Patrick. I've never started with Hatate against Rangers. I'm just looking ahead. I'm maybe getting ahead of myself. I know we've got 2 tricky games before then for the big game at Ibrox, and I wouldn't like to see a repeat, because as John said before, I had the feeling that Livingston could have scored. It was a bit of a, you score, we score, we outscore you. That's how it turned into people call it a classic cup tie. I just thought it was shambolic to be conceding 2 goals against the worst team in the league. And I'm concerned if that's going to be the starting back 4 as we go into Ibrox. Welsh, I've been a big supporter, like Brian said. We're going to have a conversation about, can our homegrown players make it at Celtic? The irony being obviously our captain's homegrown, but we've not produced enough. And there's been conversations around Scottish football players going elsewhere to develop. Lewis Ferguson being the most obvious example recently. So what's your take on it when we talk about the Lagerbielke scenario, the pace of Lagerbielke. And again, going back to that point, why sign him if he's slow?
Yeah, I agree with you, Paul John, because it's not noticeable that it's not like he's towing a caravan. You know, he's obviously kept all those clean sheets in the domestic games that he started in. I think it might only be 5 or 6, but he's obviously kept those clean sheets. Brendan, for whatever reason, clearly does not fancy the guy. I mean, as I say, we kept him around in January, and I think the last time he came on was Feyenoord when he scored that goal. I can't remember him even coming on in a game since then, and that was mid-December. So no idea why we've kept him around. I thought he was okay. I thought he was prone to a mistake, but just about every game we've played this season, you know, John's right, it is like a sieve. We seem prone to mistakes regardless of who plays in that centre-half pair. The only time we've looked relatively solid is when Carter Vickers is there, and it's really not mattered who's next to him. It's because of him we've looked relatively solid. My preference would be Narowski and Carter Vickers. I don't think Narowski's that slow. I think he's a decent pass with the ball. That would be my first two, but I think Lagerbielke has to come in. You know, I thought it was decent centre half. We've kept him around for a reason. A bit like yourself and Brian, I have been a fan of Welsh, but I think it's always a bit of a lottery when he comes into the team.
Mm-hmm.
I think he came in beginning of last season. He scored against Aberdeen. Played a couple of good games, get injured. Thought he played well for the 60 minutes or so. He played against Rangers, gets injured, comes in at the weekend there and just has a terrible game. I seen someone in the comments say that he might be injured. Not sure how true that is, but it's just a bit of a lottery whenever he starts for me. But obviously, he's a homegrown talent. He's Scottish. He's half decent when he comes into the team. So we're obviously keeping him around for the Champions League quota. But you know, I'd like to see Lagerbielke play at the weekend, but I feel as if we're going to have the same centre half pair. And you're right in what you say. We need to start producing better players because I think there was an analysis done where if you took Kieran Tierney out of the academy, that academy must have made one hell of a loss in terms of the money that we've put into it year on year. Lennox Town, the new Barrafield development, and look at what it's produced. I mean, it's hard to quantify in monetary terms what guys like Forrest and McGregor have contributed, even guys like Ralston in the last few years. It's hard to put a figure on that, but obviously you take the 25 million for Tierney out of the equation, and it's been outright failure. And that's what worries me about this Barrafield development because we are allegedly spending roughly 15 million on this, and it's part of the reason we've not spent more in the transfer window, possibly costing us a £55 million pot in the Champions League this season. But I mean, if we're going to have the same guys running the academy, I don't know what a new site or a new training centre does.
Precisely.
Well, it was myself. It was me that did the analysis, actually, Patrick, for coming on here, and there are some sort of difficulties trying to work out the value of squad players and current players and transfer values and all the rest of it. But if you take that 25 million out, it's not even close. It's not even remotely close. It's not a discussion where that the academy has not covered itself at all. Let's call it conservatively £20 million short. It required all of the Tierney money to make the figures add up. So yeah, I mean, and again, with the I agree entirely with you. The Barrowfield, where did that come from? Because they were selling that up. So why are we suddenly putting 15 million in there? Is there suddenly what is the plan for the youth teams? What is the plan for the B teams and essentially the women's team as well? That is a vast amount of money to put into infrastructure without a cohesive plan. Who's going to play there, but who's going to be in charge of it, and how is that going to feed into the wider club? And how do we know how that's going to work if we don't have a director of football? Or, is it all going to be down to the manager? Who's going to be in charge of that? And that comes back to a conversation I'm sure we'll have later about the structure that we need at the club. But that is a hell of a chunk of change with so much at stake. And And as I said before when we talked about it, I like infrastructure projects. I think, usually they benefit you in the long run. But there's a long run, and then there's a very, very real issue we have in front of us right now. The biggest pot of money we've ever had, playing for the biggest prize we've ever had, and we haven't spent anything. And we're earmarking stuff for, the youth team and the women's team, which is grand. But in the face of no expenditure on the first team, it's a shocking decision.
It is. It's a poor decision. And the pair of you have already said it, but I think, you can have a big new shiny toy, but if you don't have the people at the helm, the right people, the best in their class, in their field, then what is the point? Because we could be having this conversation in 10 years' time if we don't have the right people in there. We're not doing it right at the moment. We can identify players, of course we can. People, I think, sometimes are resigned to the fact, Brian, that, you can't do anything to keep these young talented players. Just look at Ben Doak, and there's a whole host of them that have gone down south, that have gone to Germany. And I get all that, but a big part of it is because there's no pathway. There is virtually no chance that you're going to break through. And I think even when someone does break through, I'm going to use Mikey Johnston as an example here, because the other day we were talking about, obviously, he's shown some really good form at West Brom. I hope that it continues so that he can go there permanently. No disrespect to the guy. I think that's the best move for him. But I asked the question, Brian, have we done enough to develop him since he came into the first team squad? And what I meant by that is it took until last season, having the same conversation every pre-season, is this Mikey's last chance? It took until last season under Ange to actually put him out on loan, to get him some game time. And I think that even his most harsh critics would concede that it did him pretty well. He got more games in a season than he ever has had at Celtic. He broke into the Republic of Ireland squad. He became a regular there, scored a couple of goals, got a couple of man of the match awards. And obviously, he's kicked on in his second loan deal. Did we do enough to develop him, Brian?
It's always hard to say. I get the feeling with Mikey Johnston that I think there was a lot of pressure, and I think maybe that's where, because when he went to Portugal, he done well, but there's no pressure on him.
Yeah.
He's down in England, there's no real pressure on him. I get the impression maybe he was trying too hard and expectation was too strong. I've said before as well, there's always that weird dynamic with homegrown players in the Celtic support. Like James Forrest never gets the credit he deserves for me. I think guy's an absolute legend. But there's always that thing that we can't quite do it because he came through. We never signed him for some Italian second division team. It's always a wee bit strange for me. So maybe it's a similar thing with Johnson. But ultimately, when you talk about the youth players and the players come through, I'm always banging on about structure and the lack of it, right? And one of the reasons is for this. So we've got a transfer policy assigning these young guys, under 23, developing them and trying to sell them on for profit. And yet we've got an academy of players who we don't bring in, develop and sell them for profit. It's so strange. Like they don't go together. And I think that Celtic's an unusual club in that regard in terms of bringing players through, because there's always so much pressure. And this is where I'm playing like devil's advocate, although I do agree we should be playing the youngsters more. But when you're in the two-horse race and there's loads of pressure and you need to win because everything's at stake, if Rodgers had come in at the start of the season, 2 months in, went, do you know what? These guys we've signed are rotten. Let's play Vata every week. Young Kelly. Let's recall the boy Anderson, I think, for loan. It's covered for Taylor. And we were still in this position. We'd be saying, it's not working, you need to sign players. So are we as a support willing to go, right, let's get these guys in at 18 and give them, a bit of time in the team and let them be up and down and for the long term see how successful it's going to be? I'm not convinced we would. And I know we a lot of time compare ourselves to Copenhagen and stuff like that. And I think that's right. I think we should be doing what they're doing. Don't get me wrong. But if we were to say, look, we're going to just focus on the youth guys and then bring in a couple of experienced players in the transfer window to subsidise that and sort of, make a team where there's a mixture of experience and youth. But it may take us 2-3 seasons before we're really challenging and really pushing in Europe. And I think that would be unacceptable for people. And that's the problem. So it's finding that balance. And And at the moment, there's no balance because we're not doing it at all. So it's clearly not working to the guys' points. But I'm hoping, guys like Kelly appearing. I think he's looked good so far. I think you've got Lowell, who's doing well at Fleetwood. You would imagine he's going to come back and do all right. You've got the guys I mentioned, Anderson on loan, left back. I think he's doing fairly well. You've got Boy Summers as well. So you may find these guys form more of a part of it, and over time you start to see more. But until there's a real strong director of football that says, look, this is how we play, this is the way we play, we're going to recruit an academy to play this way with this type of player, and we should be able to drop straight into the first team. And if there's not enough of them, we can subsidise it with experienced signings. I don't think the status was going to change. And, just one last thing is, we didn't care as much about this stuff when Ange was smashing it for the 2 seasons. We never really cared about this much too much when we're doing really well. And we have to be consistent across the board. And we have to pick a lane. And I don't think it's fair to always say, right, the academy needs to be better, this needs to be better, this needs to be better, the restructure. If we're not doing it in the good times as well. And I think most of us have been, especially even during Ange's time. We said we need a director of football, we need these things.
Yep.
I think it's the case now. We're doing it, but it's just there's always a sharper focus when we're not doing well.
The thing is, Brian, I can see obviously the live viewers when we're doing the show, and there's a couple of discussion points that when we delve into them at certain times, I can actually see people switching off. And sometimes it's indie Britpop music from the 1990s that switches people's attention off. And other times it's when you're doing well and you have the discussions that we're having now, because people didn't really want to hear it because we're winning on the park. So everything, it really does mask a million deficiencies. So you're spot on. Ali G75, good question. When is the big man back? We're not in the press conference this week, or would ask him. We'd also be asking him about Carter Vickers, Hatate, McGregor. I know there was an update with Hatate and Palmer. Let's not forget Palmer's injured. He's on the treatment table as well.
The really worrying thing, Paul John, for me is that Carter Vickers is apparently going with the state squad. I think that's a huge concern. I mean, he's hardly put a run of a few games together this year. I'd be very, very concerned if he's got his hamstrings already twitching if he goes away and plays for the US, and what are crucial games for them, as I understand it. So if he's thrown in there, I'd be very concerned that he comes back or is possibly out for the rest of the season.
That'd be a nightmare. That'd be a nightmare, particularly when you look at what happened with Hatate. These are big risks for players who can win or lose you the league.
That's a very similar situation. Because you think about it, Hatate hadn't really kicked a ball. Mm-hmm. He was only coming back for us. Hadn't been playing all season. He wasn't in form at the start of the year, and he's coming back from injury. And then they threw him in. Japan threw him in to start those games and ruptured both his calves. So it's a real concern.
No, you're right. It is. It's massive. If we lost Carter Vickers, I don't think my confidence would be that high. I've got to be honest. Dennis Maxwell, welcome to the show. You are commenting on the YouTube. Agree with John. A formal season, bar a handful of games, has been average at best. A lot of flack levelled at the centre backs, but neither of them are Beckenbauer. The midfield, the name Beckenbauer was used in Jack Hendry's scouting reports. The midfield is the issue and too safe and negative. We'll get to the midfield as well.
It was used in the same context. He's no Beckenbauer.
I would love to say it was. I think they were calling him Jackenbauer in the scouting report. Brian, you're looking very smart today, according to Lucy. There you go. Nice wee bit of positivity coming through. And on the point of Henrik McLarsson has this to say. Oh dear. He has disappeared from view. Obviously, Ida is Brendan's man. We're going to be talking about Kyogo, and the time is now to get the wee fella back into the start 11. Robert Hammond, I don't know if Lagerbielke is good enough, but I know that Welsh and Scales aren't. If I'm going to be safe as fair as I can be to Scales, I would say that very much like Matt O'Reilly, he's never had a rest. Now, I know that people say professional footballers, mollycoddle, big money, they don't need a rest. They should be able to play 2 games every week. Every now and again, a footballer needs a rest. It's just natural. And I think that because of where we find ourselves, both with injuries and the fact that every single point is a prisoner at the moment, we can't afford to rest either of the two of them. But they look fatigued.
Do you think that's even more important in Scales, because essentially, he was playing above himself.
Mm-hmm.
So he was playing at the absolute top of we think he's capable of. And, now he's maybe dropped off it a bit because he is getting tired. Now, you wouldn't say it's as serious as that for Matt O'Reilly. He's just, he's out of form. But, fatigue could be a massive factor with Scales.
Yeah, absolutely, John. Because again, I know he played quite a bit of football with Aberdeen, but not to the same, as you say, the same intensity to be reaching the peak performance levels, his peak performance levels every single time. Paul McFarlane, welcome to the show. Totally agree, John. Everybody's agreeing with you today, John. Afternoon, gentlemen. Congrats to
Very unusual.
for our award for the Rock game coverage, top quality. Yes, it was really good to receive that on behalf of the Acsom team and everybody who was involved. Francois, our centre halves are the problem. Fix that, and the fullbacks will click defensively. We're going to be talking then. Going to jump to the top of the team and speak a wee bit about Kyogo. I said earlier, Patrick, that Ida is clearly Brendan's man. What I meant by that is he's kind of pushed O right out the picture, isn't he? I think it's time that we found a way to get Kyogo back on. Someone said earlier we need a 30-goal season striker. We've got one. Play him. Play to his strengths. I thought we were playing to Kyogo's strengths at the weekend when Kyogo was on the bench.
Excuse me. Yeah. It's nice to see him get a goal. Obviously, Ida misses a penalty, hasn't scored in 2 games. Normally, I would advocate for Kyogo coming back in. I prefer him. I think he's the best striker at the club, hands down. But just the team that we're coming up against, Craig Levine, St Johnstone, relegation battle, they're going to have, 12 men behind the ball, never mind 11. I mean, he's going to play his 4-6-0 formation, probably. That famous formation for Scotland that works so well. So, I mean, for that reason, I would almost sort of prefer Ida, but I think to have a guy like Kyogo on the bench, I think you need to find a way to get him on the side, and we've struggled to do that all season because we're just not getting them the service because our wingers are terrible. That they're just non-existent. Yang came into a bit of form. He's now banned for 2 games. I think he served one of them at the weekend there because it was a cup game. I'm not sure if that counts or not, but he'll be back soon, hopefully. But I mean, the rest of them, Maeda does a job. Palmer's injured. Forrest, I'm sure we'll come on to talk about that. I thought Forrest done all right at the weekend, last 15, 20 minutes. I can understand what Brendan's saying. He's a very talented winger. It's just a shame he's, I think, 31 or 32 now. Great cross with the ball, can take a man on even at his age. Brilliant first touch. There is a case to be made for playing him this season because of how bad everyone else has been. I think I said it 1 or 2 weeks ago. There's such a lack of quality on either side that to get the ball to Kyogo, I would consider starting James Forrest actually. Because, as Brendan says, he is a very good player, even if he is a bit older. But coming up against that defence, I mean, it's going to be so packed, it's going to be a bit like Livingston. I probably would try and play him. He's got a goal, hopefully that will help his confidence. If we can get the ball to him, he will be that 30, I think it was 34 goals he got last season. We need to get that Kyogo back. As for Scales and Matt O'Reilly, I don't think it is fatigue just because they did have those 2 weeks in January at the winter break, and since then they've actually been worse. So I'm personally not sure that it is fatigue. I think we maybe just got into a bit of a rhythm and a bit of momentum in the first half of the season, and personally they were both having very good seasons in the first 6 months. You then take 2-3 weeks out of that, you come back, you're struggling a bit, and maybe you struggle to recapture that form. I think, I would certainly drop Scales. I don't think you can drop O'Reilly just because of the lack of options that we now have. I mean, we're bringing on Daniel Kelly. No harm to him, but really you wouldn't be asking to bring on Daniel Kelly if all your midfielders were fit. So I don't think you can drop O'Reilly. I think you can drop Scales because I think it has more to do with form than it is fatigue. But I would bring Kyogo and James Forrest into the starting 11 at the weekend.
It's an interesting point, John, because we were talking about James Forrest. Obviously, the comments made by Brendan Rodgers after the game that he's the best winger. That was a bold statement. He went on, obviously, to discuss the fact that his age has caught up with him, and that will play a part in how he actually deploys him between now and the end of the season. This is the player, of course, John. There was reports that we were willing to let him go in January, James Forrest. It looked as though he was out the plans, didn't it?
Well, I said last week I prefer to see Forrest on the bench than Kuhn, because I didn't think there was any evidence. I thought until this weekend that potentially we'd been the victim of an identity theft, and that someone had swapped over Kuhn the player for his doppelganger brother or something, because he was showing no signs of being able to play football.
That happened with Bangura, didn't
it? Yeah, it's along the lines of George Weah's cousin, that sort of thing. But when he played at the weekend, he started off very well. He was having a good game. He played well. He contributed well. But then James Forrest came on and was equally, if not more effective. And to me, what that did was just put it into context. And the context is Livy's fullbacks were horrifically bad. And they pretty much had a free run. So, for me, Kuhn has to do a lot more and a lot more games coming to establish himself. I think, what I was writing down there was because he said James Forrest, obviously, he was saying, age, defeats us all in the end. Don't know what he's talking about there. I still feel like a 21-year-old. The body of an 18-year-old in a chest freezer in my basement, that sort of way the Frankie Boyle joke is. But what you call it? I know it's Forrest. He said the intensity. What is it they're asking the wingers to do that James Forrest can't do? Now he's 31, 32. He's not 36. What is it that those boys were doing at the weekend? Now, what Maeda does, the constant running up and down. That's fine. But what was Kuhn doing that Johnson wasn't, Forrest wasn't doing? I don't understand that comment in that context. He obviously he's older than these guys. Mm-hmm. But what is the job he's been expected to do? I mean, basically, the way it's people saying he can't beat a man. Well, neither can Kuhn, from what I can see. But what they're doing is they're overlapping brilliantly. What Yang was doing, and the reason Yang started playing well, he stopped trying to beat everyone and started linking up with Johnson. And it was Johnson's putting a lot of these deadly balls in. It's not necessarily the winger that's doing that. So is he capable? Is James Forrest capable of linking up Alistair Johnson? I think he's more than capable of doing that. And he's got some excellent delivery, really excellent delivery, and he's got experience, and he's not going to panic on the ball. He's not going to get flustered. He understands the pressure. Look, I mean, our productivity from the wings has been absolutely horrific until Yang started, picking up a couple of games. So, when I said he should be on the bench in front of Kuhn, I said that last week. I was serious. He should, for me, I don't see the difference between the two of them really. Now, Kuhn picked out Maeda beautifully with the first one. So would James Forrest have done that? I don't know. Maybe not. It depends. But it's horses for courses. I think they're, I think he's a serious option on the bench, and I think the thing that's exasperating is Big Ida is now turning out to be as inconsistent as everyone else in the team. So he's had a couple of absolutely cracking performances, and then he's all of a sudden it looks like he can't kick a ball. So it's really, really frustrating to watch the team. And then you've got Maeda on the other side who's giving you a hat-trick and missing 3 sitters at the same time. And it's, that's the only kind of game that Maeda could get a hat-trick. By the way, I picked up a wee factoid from elsewhere. Do you know how often Maeda has scored more than 1 goal in a game?
And is this in his entire career or just for
His
Celtic?
entire career with Celtic. Celtic.
Is that the first time?
That's the first time. Yeah, he scored
interesting.
27 times in 100 appearances, and all of them have been single goals until this one. So, you know, it's look, we have the issues that we have are, you know, effectively as a team. There's not one bit of the team that you can say is playing effectively. We've got defensive issues, we've got midfield issues, we've got issues up front, right? So it's very, very difficult to pick out exactly where the issues lie. And from week to week, the thing that makes it even more difficult is certain players will have a cracking game, other players will look as if they've never seen a ball before. You know, and the guy that looks like he's never seen a ball before was the guy that had a cracking game last week.
Yeah.
You know, so it's just incredibly frustrating. And I wish I was enough of a, you know, like an elite coach like Brendan Rodgers where I could actually see what the answers are. But apparently elite coaches can't see it either.
John, it's a great point because we mentioned Palmer before. Nobody can deny, Brian, Palmer has had great games for Celtic. He's scored brilliant goals. His stats are brilliant in terms of goal creation, goal scoring. Maeda has had moments and games and patches. Bernardo, prior to the break, was playing really, really well. But it's about trying to bring it all together. And I think Kyogo's part of that. Kyogo's part of that problem as well. He comes on, he scores a goal, and he's been up and down. He scored 2 of the most important goals for Celtic this season against Rangers, of course. And with the 2 games between now and the Rangers game, between us, St Johnstone and, of course, Livingston away, I'm looking at guys like Kyogo and Lagerbielke and I'm thinking, right, you're going to have to get more game time in these guys because when it comes to Rangers, these guys might have to start. I want Kyogo back in the starting 11. I think he does done really, really well. Horses for courses, I get it. Certain games, you think Ida might, you know, the physicality up top. He stretches the back line really well. No comparing them per se as players, but I love the way that the likes of Giakoumakis would stretch the back line. Dembele was brilliant at it. I think Ida's good at it. You know, he really will. He'll pull guys out of position. I think he could do really well up top against Rangers. Can we play the both of them? I don't know how to fit it in because I'm not an elite coach, Brian. But what I do know is that Kyogo, having scored 20 and 34, and this season 14, it's not like he's having a complete flop of a season. Get him back in, finish strongly, and that could be the difference between us winning this league and being runners-up.
So I think what you need to look at with this Celtic team is the dynamics of the team as a whole. And I think Kyogo comes back in when Hatate's back in, because I think that's when they see the best version of both of them. Because if you look at, there's been a lot of criticism of Matt Riley, and actually it's no personal favouritism, but I think it's a bit unfair because he looks as if he's doing 3 jobs in midfield just now. And when you've got Hatate in, he can create so much. O'Reilly can chip in and sort of, you know, be sort of box to box, help defence, help attack. And you've got McGregor to take and play. If you've not got McGregor to take and play, and you've not got Hatate being that creative force, O'Reilly's having to do all of that. Mm-hmm. And he just can't. And especially when he goes, right, keep it simple, get the balls to the wire. And at John's point, Yang either looks like he's never seen a ball before or he's the best player I've ever had at crosses. It's insanity. Maeda, I still don't think he's a winger. Still think he's a striker playing out wide. So I think it's really unfair. So I think the dynamics will dictate the team selection. That's a roundabout way of saying, I think for the St Johnstone game, unless Hatate's back in, I think you have to start Ida. Just purely because you can keep it a bit simpler. You can say, get it wide, get crosses in, and hope the big man can either get a head on it or knock it down or hold it up. Because with Kyogo, although his movement's incredible, if we've not got anyone in midfield to find him, that's why he's not scoring. And, you know, Brendan Rodgers, the Gucci belt wearing Spanish speaking elite manager we all know and love, can he find a way to get the benefit of Kyogo? It's not going to happen now. So I think unless Hatate's back in, I don't see Kyogo starting. Doesn't mean that's what I want. I'd love Kyogo back in, buying him in, and I do agree. I think he's still our best striker by a comfortable distance. But it's not utilised properly in this team. Because even the wingers are crossing, putting cross balls in, they're putting them in for the likes of Ida. Kyogo's not getting them. He gets low crosses across the box because of the different movement or balls played through. We don't have wingers that are doing that, and we don't have midfielders that are doing that for him. So until that changes, I think you need to keep it simple and just get the wingers putting crosses in, and then either getting them back of them. And then think about it as when Kyogo, at least when Kyogo comes on, what you can see is at that time, either we're so comfortable that the opposition players are sort of pushing out and he's got a bit of space and the game's a bit more stretched, in which case he can be really effective because he can run onto things a bit more. Or we're really struggling, in which case he can provide that spark. So I think that's what you're going to have to see. It really depends on the team selection for me.
You say, I think you're struggling there, Brian, to say that you've got no favouritism for Matt O'Reilly once you've declared ownership of the pyjamas.
Aye. It's true. It makes us some uncomfortable bedtimes at times, but that's just my demons to deal with.
Listen, Brian, we said we were going to stick to the football, not mention all that kind of stuff and Kate Middleton going missing and all that. I mean, it's obviously one of these conspiracies, of course, that these things could happen in this country in this day and age. But Brian, please, for the sake of Lucy in the comment section, wear your Matt O'Reilly jammers the next time you're on. I would love to see it. I would absolutely love to see it.
You wouldn't. You really wouldn't. You really wouldn't. Listen, this tracksuit and the hoodies and all they wear, they hide a multitude of sins. So they're certainly going to. I'm going to expose anyone to me in pyjamas. Nobody needs that in their life.
Come along to an Acsom live event and meet Brian in person, and then you can decide whether or not he's being humble. Pat Morrissey, here we go. Cohesive plan and Celtic don't belong in the same sentence, John. Talking about plans, Liam Carrigan was talking about the fact that the Japan Football Association had a 100-year plan to improve Japanese football. They're 31 years into it, and I just thought to myself, wow, the foresight to have a 100-year plan. That's incredible. Robert Arbuckle.
Remember the Germans done that a few years? Sorry to interrupt. The Germans done that. Remember when it was? I think they failed to qualify for one of the tournaments, and then just completely rejigged the German FA how they ran it, and then didn't want to win the World Cup a few years later. It's almost like if you're in a position of authority, you should have a plan. It's crazy.
We're neither as a football association and as a football nation. We're neither proactive or even reactive at that level, I don't think. Talking about reactive, we'll come back to the death of the Scottish football away day in a wee second. Robert Arbuckle, are Darren O'Day and Steve McMahon still registered as players? Yeah, tongue-in-cheek comment, but are they the best coaches we could get at that level? That would be my question. Probably not.
Can I ask, just before we go on to the next topic, I just say the midfield. Again, for me, that's a massive issue, as important, if not more important than any of the others. I think the couple of problems we have, Awata looks to be a player, but he's too slow, and I don't mean physically, I mean mentally. He needs to be much, much faster in his decision-making. And I know that we made jokes about this earlier on in the season, and Alan Morrison has mentioned it a number of times, about prior to Bernardo's sort of run of games, Joe Hart had better passing scores than Bernardo.
Yep.
But I actually, for a period during that game at the weekend, I actually watched him. I kept my eye on him, mainly because I was trying to decide Maeda's really confused things with growing his hair back, but I kept an eye on Bernardo, and I had to stop watching him because it was driving me insane. He wouldn't pass the ball forward.
No.
The man, I swear to God, if the man had to make a pass at a girl, she'd have to be behind him. They come here often. It was absolutely unbelievable. He will not pass the ball forward. And the only time he's effective in attack like that is when someone puts him through. I don't understand it because he's got the skills, he's got quick feet, he's got a good shot. He is allergic to making a forward pass. Honestly, if you watch him, it starts to get to the point where you have to look away because it's just so annoying. That's a massive issue. But you would think that would be easily rectified. The Awata thing, move the ball faster, son. If you don't move the ball within about 3 seconds, you're getting a £50 fine or £100 fine. And Bernardo, if I was his coach, I'd be saying to him in training, if you don't make a forward pass, any pass you make to the side or back is a £100 fine. right? And let's see how many thousands you're down by the end of this training session. Because just to get it and drill it into him, make the forward pass. Doesn't matter if it's on or not. Try and make the forward pass. Try and make something happen. We can't have someone playing in that position who won't pass the ball forward, because everything your entire momentum just stops. What's the point in passing to him? He's just going to pass it back to you, pass it sideways or pass it. What is the point?
See what you're saying, John?
The other question on that was just one. How bad is Home? How can Home be on the bench when they're bringing the young fella on as well? And Home, who is supposed to be a good player, we're bringing an 18-year-old on, and fair play to him, he looks decent. But, how bad is Home? He was supposed to be creative. Bernardo was a defensive player, and now we're hoping to turn him into something else. But Bernardo clearly has the skills, and he has dig, and he has an engine, and he has all the things you'd want to build on. Just make the pass forward, for the love of God.
No, you're right. Talking about the collective, John, right? We've touched on the defence, the Welsh and Scales, the inability of Scales to play the ball in front of Welsh, the inability of Welsh to kick the ball with his left foot. There's another one. Watch the next 90 minutes and count how many times he actually kicks the ball with his left foot. And the style and the speed, or lack of, in which they get the ball forward. So you've got it happen slowly at the back. You've then got the points you've just made there about Iwata. Far too many touches on the ball, too slow. Bernardo unable, incapable of playing the ball forward. And then you've got the wingers who kept all season cutting inside rather than hitting the byline. So you've got it all over the park. Things that are slowing us down, slowing the play down. Even if you take out the issue by putting in someone like Carter Vickers, I think Nawrocki's very good at getting the ball out and getting the ball out quickly, sometimes playing that searching pass to Kyogo that Brian spoke about. You then talk about Hatate. Remove the slow players from the midfield and put Hatate in there, and then that changes. The wingers I'm a wee bit more concerned about, because I don't know if we've got the personnel. James Forrest done it, maybe can do it for 20 or 30 minutes in a game. Kuhn looked a wee bit more promising than he has done. And as you say, Yang came in and had a wee burst as well. But other than that, the wingers have been one of the biggest issues. But it's all over the park. It absolutely is all over the park. Now, a couple of wee points from the comment section before we wrap up here. Paul McFarlane, you're in again. That's twice in a day. That's favouritism. Sorry, guys, but it was two really good points. Who has two training grounds? Keep Barrowfield, sell Lennoxtown, and improve the team and the stadium. I do find it unusual, but I think it's down to the footprint of Celtic Park. You see these big teams down south, or the rich teams down south, who everything is in one complex. It's all there. You've got the stadium, you've got all the training pitches. It's all in one footprint. Celtic can't do that just because of the geographical default. So we've got two other places to see to and to pay for as well. Robert Little, if a decent player comes through the ranks, they leave and the club ends up with a nominal fee. Is it worth it? Well, our academy produces players for just about every other team in Scottish football outside the Premier League. Danny Boy, if we win the league, it frightens me that the board will say we're fine, because that's them all over the back. If Rodgers wins this league, honestly, it probably will come down to the last kick of the ball on the last day of the season. And if we do, and we access the riches, the cash riches of the Champions League at the end of it, I do not think there's an option for the board to sit on that and think, oh, job done. We've done really well. Look how well we've done and how shrewd we've been. I just think that's impossible. Lucy, tiptoeing on here. No need to tiptoe. Get it out your system. We'll bring it up on the comment section. And Lywell's ego. Give Ireland back to the Irish. Done. Let Adidas take it away. Paul McCartney, of course, sang that song, Give Ireland Back to the Irish. And every time someone mentions it, I implore them to go and also listen to John Lennon's The Luck of the Irish, which was a song that he released as well. 1972, from Sometime in New York City, that particular track. Try and ignore Yoko Ono's backing vocals, and it's a really good track. Because she's horrific. She murders it, in fact. So B says Welsh was injured and played, apparently. Well, I'll tell you, it is mad. And if you're Lagerbielk, you'll be thinking it's pretty mad if that's the case as well. Just a wee roundup of the carry-on that's happening on the away days, Paddy. What's your thoughts on that? We're obviously getting lumped in with Rangers. It would appear Celtic fans are getting lumped in with the Rangers fans when people are trying to explain why they're doing it. But it is really the slow death of the Scottish away day. I mean, Scottish football's great at it, destroying probably the best sporting product that they've got, and they'll destroy it bit by bit. The away day will never be the same again.
Yeah, it's certainly looking that way. A lot of people say about the English League that they're going to eat themselves. We're going to starve ourselves up here, locking out away fans. And how many businesses with revenues of between 3 and 6 million, and that's some of the bigger teams, turnovers of 3 to 6 million. They actually turn away paying customers. I mean, it's incredible. Teams like Motherwell, I think, is the example I always use, because their ground is sitting, it's like 60% empty in the home end. And you can talk about home advantage, but this is a team who hadn't beat Rangers since 2002. So the home advantage obviously wasn't doing anything for them. So why not just, if there's away fans willing to buy tickets, just hoover up the money that you so desperately need, because there's a lot of teams even still in financial difficulty. Hibs have obviously been the latest to do it. That statement's quite ironic when you had Hibs fans throwing, I think it was a bottle opener at Lawrence Shankland only a few weeks earlier. Hibs, to be fair, were one of the better ones. Their ground was fairly full. They gave us a full stand, but it seems to be going one way. I mean, the Hearts allocation just over a week ago was a disgrace. I mean, it was so slim, that sort of corner that they gave us, and it's just a waste of time. If you're going to give us that little amount of tickets, just don't bother. I've always said, if they're going to fill their own end, absolutely fair enough. But if they're just going to let it sit empty to spite other teams, to spite Celtic fans and Rangers fans, then I personally think the league should be stepping in, because it doesn't help the product that we're trying to sell to the TV companies. Who wants to watch, Celtic try and break down St Johnstone when the St Johnstone end is absolutely empty and the pitch is terrible and you've got 11 men behind the ball? I mean, that's a hard enough sell as it is. You should get the fans in, get the atmosphere up. You don't see any empty seats in any English stadium, and it shows. There's a correlation there. It's no coincidence. So it seems to be going one way at the minute, which is quite sad. But it's going to come to a point. There has to be a reverse on this, because they're just turning away paying customers, and it's not sustainable.
It's ridiculous. John, I'm going to ask you one final question before we go. Do you think I was biased on the comments today?
Tremendously biased, Paul John. And obviously all those people had paid you beforehand to get their comments up there.
You've hit the nail on the head, John. Just DM me on the socials, guys. Brown Warrior, one final comment. 1975's in the away end at Oakview. Why are we playing this boy Aiken? He was 16 at the time, by the way, Roy Aiken. 10 years later, that's why, right? So that's a great point. By 1985, 10 years after Roy Aiken made his debut, what had he done for Celtic? Well, he had been part of that team when 10 men won the league. He scored in the 4-2 game. He'd been part of the team who won the double in 1977, the Scottish Cup and League, which was the last hurrah for Jockstein. He won the Scottish Cup in 1980. He was part of that defensive set up after the game. There was a wee riot after the game. He was part of that. And of course, in the 1984, and he was just a raw 16-year-old boy that Sean Fallon threw in at Oakview against Stenhousemuir. So it's a great point, Brown Warrior. Thank you very much.
Can I just make one final point, Paul John? We started off laughing at the comment where dinosaurs were apparently a Masonic conspiracy. But I would say surely Craig Levine and Neil Warnock prove the existence of dinosaurs, don't they?
Particularly the latter, John. Particularly the latter. Talk about making ourselves a laughing stock. These things certainly contribute to it, I'll tell you that much. But a wee prediction then, Brian, for the weekend, St Johnstone?
I'm hoping, I think it'll be a comfortable 3-1 win, and we'll get back on track. It'll keep it simple, and we'll get a bit more consistent towards the end of the season.
Nice, 3-1, says Brian. Patrick?
I'll go 4-1. I think we'll get back to the form of Dundee 2 midweeks ago. Comfortable 4-1. Obviously, we can't keep a clean sheet to save ourselves, so 4-1.
4-1. And John, what do you reckon?
2-1.
Will St
More
Johnstone
conservative.
Will St Johnstone go ahead? because if they do, that'll be an interesting half-time.
Quite likely.
Aye, stodgy penalties.
Yeah.
Thank you, every single one of you, for getting involved. 1,300 strong on this Wednesday afternoon. It's been an absolute pleasure to be joined by these guys. It always is. So all that's left for me to do is thank you, Patrick McGill, John Hughes, Brian Degnan, for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Here we are.